At the end of a long, long week, I am glad to begin the Weekend Review Show with our friend John Ellis of News Items, the indispensable newsletter I begin my morning news read with. John and I usually talk about four stories. The biggest story, of course, is the assassination of Charlie Kirk that continues to reverberate and will at least through the morning on Sunday in Phoenix. John, in 2018, we had the Kavanaugh hearings. In 2016, in 2002, we had 9/11. Do you think the murder of Charlie carries over to 2026?
I don't know. Obviously, none of us know, but I do think that Republicans think that they have a shot in New Jersey, and I think the murder of Charlie Kirk has energized the Republican base in a way I think more so than the Kavanaugh hearings did. And so I think that the thing about midterm elections these days, it used to be that the Republicans didn't vote and the Democrats didn't vote and the Republicans did. But now in midterm elections, Democrats turn out more in greater numbers than do Republicans. So Republicans are at a bit of a disadvantage in a midterm election just because their base is less interested. So anything that energizes the Republican base and drives them out to vote is a positive, obviously. And this appears to be one of those events that has the Republican base, truly energized as they were after the Kavanaugh hearings in 2018, but I think it's much greater this time. So the Republicans will lose Virginia gubernatorial off-year election for sure, but New Jersey is close, and it may be the difference there.
I might take your odds on Virginia because of some ridiculous decisions locally. I live in the Northern Virginia area, and some superintendents have done some very stupid things, just like 2020. So we'll see. John, I am surprised. I wonder if you are. I knew that young people and friends, family, people who worked with Charlie closely. I was a colleague, but I didn't work with him closely, and I was friendly, but not a friend. They're stunned. Older people like John Campbell and Selena Zito, are really grieving. Are you surprised that it hit an older demographic so hard?
I was very surprised. I thought of Charlie Kirk in the context of American Turning Point in the 2024 election. He focused his efforts on, I believe, three swing states and really energized the youth vote to the degree that in those states, amongst male voters 18 to 29, they voted Trump plus 20. So the margin between Trump and Harris amongst male voters between the ages of 18 and 29 was 20% plus.
Wow.
The other, which is, of all the numbers that stick out from the Fox News, AP, NORC Election Day voter poll, which, is based on interviews with 150,000 voters, so it was probably the best of the lot. That was the number that really jumped off the page.
I want to move to the second story, Meta and its new glasses. I don't know that I can adapt. I'm curious, though. Tell me about them.
Well, they have what are called smart glasses, and the glasses are connected to the internet, and they are powered by artificial intelligence. There's a famous demo where a person puts on these glasses and he sees somebody sitting on a park bench, and he gets closer and closer, and the facial recognition goes through all the LinkedIn pages and so on and so forth, and it turns out that the name that pops up is Hugh Hewitt, and then the information about Hugh Hewitt pops up, and so that person that you've never met before can come up to you and say, "Oh, Hugh, it's great to see you. I love your show on Salem Radio Network," or whatever it's called,
or the opposite,
or the opposite. But it raises huge issues of privacy, obviously.
Yes.
and the ability to identify somebody without knowing them at all, just running into them on the street and using the glasses, and the glasses sorting through everything and telling you who that person is, where they were born, what they do, et cetera, et cetera. It's an astonishing technology, and obviously it's a great one for law enforcement.
Another one that we haven't really thought through, like the internet, it's going to have a long-term implication. I do want to talk to you. I raised this as the number one story. I always borrow from news items when I'm posting on X in the morning, and I'll put up one or two and link to news items. And I put up the Wired story on the world of pregnancy radically changing because I'm horrified by it. And I imagine I'm not alone, but I also imagine there are a lot of Brave New World people who like it. What's the reaction? Or tell people what we're talking about and what the reaction is.
Well, there's a woman named Noor Siddiqui, who is the founder and CEO of a company called Orchid. And Orchid offers whole genome screening of embryos for IVF. And she says, I think that the default way people are going to choose to have kids is via IVF and embryo screening. And the reason she says that this is good is that by analyzing the DNA of different embryos before selecting which one to implant, parents can lower the risk their children grow up affected by conditions with a genetic basis. So you can essentially edit out the embryo that is more likely to have some disease, and you can choose the one that is less likely to have that disease, which is an astonishing capability, to say the least. And I think
Didn't we used to call that eugenics, John?
well, I was just about to get to that. I think that I think that you and I saw with Roe v. Wade a 40-year effort to overturn that ruling by the Supreme Court, and it energized a vast number of people all across the country, and they kept at it, and eventually the Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade. So what's the next major issue about life, essentially, and the creation of life? And I think it will be this. I think this is going to be the major issue in the next 5 years is, do we genetically engineer babies, or do we not do that? And obviously there are good reasons to do it. You would prefer to have a child who doesn't have some horrible genetic disease. And there are obvious reasons to oppose it, which, as you point out, comes under the category of eugenics. I think this is going to be a major, major issue. And I ran across this story in Wired magazine while I was putting the newsletter together, and I thought, okay, I'm going to write about that, not immediately, but I'm definitely going to be a piece that I'll do in the next 2 weeks or so.
Well, that's why I read news items. And if you want to subscribe, go to Google and just Google news items and John Ellis, and you'll go to their website. I do want to get to story 4. 1 in 4 adults suffer a stroke in their lifetime. Now, I know a lot of stroke victims, and they recover, but it's not easy. I didn't realize it was 1 in 4, John.
Yeah.
So
well,
are there additional cures on the way, or rehab drugs?
Yes, there are, and there's a drug that's now into phase 2, if you will, and we'll see. But it's again, the scientific revolution that we're going through is unlike anything in human history. A man named Jeff Hinton, was interviewed by the Financial Times recently about AI, and he said, we are in the most amazing time. We just don't know if it's amazing good or amazing bad. But this would fall under the category of amazing good. When the statistic is thrown out that 1 in 4 suffer a stroke, that includes what are called TIAs, which are sort of mini strokes. But it's all part of this scientific revolution that's going on. and it's powered by AI. It will, in the next 10 years, be powered by quantum computing, which is orders of magnitude faster and more capable than the current high-speed computing. And you and I may not live to see it, but the world that we are entering into is extraordinary and presents extraordinary challenges.
It's wild. I was listening to Will Durant last night, The Age of Napoleon, and he said it is both a blessing and a curse to live in an age of condensed history, like 1789 to 1815. I don't think I want to live in condensed history. I think we are. John Ellis, author and founder of News Items. Thank you. Go to News Items. Google it. Google John Ellison News Items. You'll love it. Thank you, John. Eli Lake is my guest. He is the host of the Breaking History podcast, available for subscribers to the Free Press and people who just like the podcast over at iTunes, Spotify, wherever they're available. Eli, I said it online, so I'll say it again. This edition on the Assassin's Veto is a work of art that I wish would be listened to and shown in every classroom in America, because it's history that a lot of people don't know. How do you do that? And how do you turn it around that quickly?
This was one of these where we had another script, and the horrible thing with Charlie happened, and I knew about this incident, and I just, like you, I think we're both very quick readers and we can process it. And so I just kind of got to work and started reading biographies of Wallace and Chisholm, and filling in, looking, for the sound bites and stuff. And fortunately, we live in an era with YouTube where you can get a lot of that stuff pretty quickly. I have great producers, and we were able to put something together because I wanted to try to do something that, just talked about what I think is, in a moment like this, real political courage. I mean, I'm sure you feel the anger, and that's an understatement, on the right, and especially with some of the reactions that we've seen on the left, not just with Jimmy Kimmel, but like, Heather Cox Richardson and others, and how, there is an example of a kind of grace in a different context, of course, that does, in the right context, not always, but can change people and can move, the discourse. And so that's kind of my hope, was whether with sharing
now,
that story.
What I'm amazed about is that you were that quick, but I would like to know, how's the response been? How's your viewership been? What are the comments like?
Well, thank you. First of all, by playing it on the air as you did on Wednesday, that has been a great boost. And so far, the response has been almost entirely positive. I mean, there are always a couple trolls online, but it's been really well received. Thank you so much for talking about it and playing it and all of that.
Do people know about Chisholm and Wallace? I did not. I like to admit when I don't know something. One of the reasons I listen to Breaking History is I always learn something. I did not know that episode. I knew everything else, but I wanted to be reminded of it. I learned a lot. Did many people know about it?
Most people I've talked to actually didn't know about it. And there were like details of it that I didn't know until I started really kind of diving in. But I would say that it's interesting because George Wallace is known to most people who kind of have a familiarity with American history as, oh yeah, he stood on the steps of the University of Alabama. He was the segregationist. That second half of his career, that second act, is not as well known, and that to me that's a sign of hope in some ways. And I say that as somebody who's on, like you, the center right. Maybe there is an opportunity to kind of get people to sort of see the harm done by like DEI or the excesses of the COVID regime, issues that I think the right was really attuned to. But the way I think that you get there is, by kind of seeing the humanity and having some empathy for the other side. Although I realize that in this environment right now, a lot of people are just not wanting to hear that because there is so much anger.
I'm hoping President Trump goes high on Sunday.
Yeah, me too.
Let me ask you, I'll talk to Matt Continenti after this. Matt did a commentary podcast yesterday in which he warned about the Wellstone Memorial Service.
Oh, yeah.
Which I knew about but had forgotten. And I think it's such a great warning to people who are attending not to be baited and not to be excessive in their anger at the left, but remain focused on the fact, And the way I phrase it is, they're making a video for Charlie's children in 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and they
Yeah,
don't want it marred. That's it,
right.
it's for those two kids first, and they don't want it marred. What do you think will happen?
Well, I think there's two things going on here. One is it's very important to kind of treat delicately this idea that an entire group of people are responsible for the actions of an individual, while also acknowledging that the demonization of Trump, the demonization of the MAGA movement and the right can lead individuals, if they take it seriously, to do horrible things. But the second thing is that I think if you look, and I've really familiarized myself with Charlie Kirk even more. I mean, of course, I knew about him. I didn't know him personally the way you did. But one of the maybe, if this is an epical kind of a hinge moment, maybe one of the results will be an awakening, for people, young people especially, who are kind of too online and sucked in by the kind of poison of online engagement, and instead build families, rediscover their religion, whether it's Judaism or Christianity, and the values of that. And that seems to me what Charlie Kirk was kind of saying, particularly towards the end, as a model that if his life can be an inspiration, maybe that inspiration is to a kind of new religious awakening, which I actually think would be a great thing for this country, especially as a kind of a tonic, a remedy for the nihilism that it can spread when you spend all of your time online, kind of farming for more rage and nursing more grievances.
And you just mentioned something, Eli.
Yeah,
Clips are not comprehensive. They're not even close. Clips can
right.
absolutely distort an individual's actual character. And I don't think I've ever been aware of that so much as this week, when a lot of people are saying, as you did, well, I knew about Charlie Kirk. He was running Turning Point, got out the vote. Didn't realize he was evangelical. Didn't realize he'd grown up a lot from 18 to 31. Didn't know anything about how he argued. And now they do. And
Right.
they may not voice it, but they may regret what happened even more.
I agree. And it's not just that his commitment to debate, that civic virtue, the idea that once we stop talking, that's when civil war starts, I think is a great quote from him. But I also think that there is a value in kind of using Charlie Kirk as a model for not just kind of intellectual curiosity, but spiritual curiosity, and finding, rediscovering the great books. And when I say the great books, I also mean the Bible and the religious texts as well. And if this can be a way for a lot of people to kind of turn back and sort of say, wait a second, there's a better way. I want to build a family. I don't want to spend all my time online. It's not an either or. Then I think that, there will be a lot of good that comes out of his legacy, and I hope that that's what happens.
Last question. Charlie has a
Yeah.
book coming out in December called Stop in the Name of God, Preserving the Sabbath for Christians as well as Jews. You know who it's dedicated to?
Is
Dennis
it,
Prager.
oh, wow. That's
That,
wonderful.
yeah, because of all of Dennis's colleagues who have been, I mean, his friends and family and close colleagues have been there by his bedside for many months. Charlie kept showing up because that's Charlie. And
Right.
he dedicated his book to him. And Dennis managed to get out a message of deep sorrow. And I'm not
Yeah.
at anger. I'm just at grieving. I'm not mad at Kimmel. It's a dumb thing. And I'll get into the car discussion with Continetti, et cetera. But I really appreciate this edition of Breaking History. It's called The
Thank you so
Assassin's
much, Hugh.
Veto. It's available everywhere. People ought to listen to it. Send it on to your friends, especially if you're on your way down to Phoenix to Charlie's memorial service. Matt Continetti, or just Continetti on X, is the head of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, columnist for the Free Press, and commentary contributor to Commentary. And that's where I want to begin, Matt. I listened yesterday, and I had wholly forgotten the Wellstone debacle, and I've done nothing but talk about it since to try and immunize people headed to Charlie's memorial service against that. Do you think the immunities are up against that kind of a debacle?
I have confidence, Hugh. I'm considering the way in which Kirk's widow has responded to the assassination. the outpouring of support for Charlie Kirk among young people throughout the nation. I do think that the memorial service this weekend will show our better natures and speak to what he believed both politically as well as spiritually and culturally. You know, I brought up the example of the Wellstone Memorial on the Commentary podcast this week because it does seem to me to be a cautionary example. After Paul Wellstone was killed in a plane crash in 2002, the memorial service that was held for him really turned not only into a Democratic political rally ahead of the midterm election, but a very kind of vitriolic attack on Republicans and independents who were in the crowd. And that, I think, really hurt the Democratic candidates' chances. Walter Mondale, the former vice president, from really taking Wellstone's seat in the Senate. So I as much as I do think that this will be an uplifting, sobering, reassuring event this weekend, I think we also need to be mindful that it could sometime, if it goes in the wrong direction, could have a boomerang effect on the way in which
So
the country
people are in deep
remembered Charlie.
grief. They're in deep grief and they're shocked. What I worry about is there will be knuckleheads outside from the other side, and there will be plants in a crowd of thousands who will stand up and try and disrupt. They might even run onto the field. And the networks for sporting events don't cover that. They don't cut away to that. Will our networks be disciplined enough not to elevate the marginal to the middle?
Well, we just don't know. And I think that some of our liberal networks are going to be inclined to show the division. And so we're just going to have faith that security will be able to handle any disruption. And that, as we've seen in Trump rallies in the past, the crowd tries to cover for whatever is happening and tries to return the attention to the speakers where it belongs. But because the country is so unsettled right now, I think you're right to be worried about these sorts of things. And nothing that's happened in the week that since Kirk was killed has made us, or made me think that we're anywhere closer to having the left understand what Charlie Kirk meant to so many millions of Americans.
The opposite. I hope they don't chant USA. I hope they chant God Bless Charlie. If they have to overcome the screamers and the banners that unfurl and the secret people who smuggle in propaganda that is hurtful. But we will see. I'll be watching it. I haven't seen anything. Ro Khanna came closest, but he is, not unlike Paul Wellstone, a very smart progressive. Have you seen anyone who did the Shirley Chisholm going to visit George Wallace after his assassination attempt that Eli Lake did a podcast about?
No, I mean, I really haven't. I mean, the closest maybe was Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, who gave a speech on political violence this week. It was not very well covered. Of course, the very next day he had to deal with that awful attack on police officers in his state. And even he spoke more about his own experience, the governor's mansion being attacked by a pro-Hamas sympathizer earlier this year during the Jewish holiday of Passover. And on the contrary, we just saw this vote in the House on the resolution honoring and affirming Charlie Kirk and his legacy, and I believe 58 Democrats voted against it. So you see there just the divide. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk with Matt during the break about Mike Waltz being confirmed this afternoon to the UN. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about Jimmy Kimmel. But during the break, and it'll be on the One Big Weekend pod, which is available wherever podcasts are available, all of everything, including the intermissions that Matt and I have for broadcast purposes, will be included. And during that, we'll talk about the very good news that Ambassador Mike Waltz will be there for UNGA next week, and to oppose the ridiculous idea of recognizing a Palestinian state while Hamas still has guns. Earlier this afternoon, on Friday afternoon, Michael Waltz was confirmed as the United States ambassador to the United Nations just in time for the UNGA, which is the gathering of the world leaders in New York. And I thought it was important to have him there. What do you think, Matt Continetti?
Oh, it's absolutely important. Mike Waltz is a very talented man. He's a great spokesman for America and for peace through strength. I think he'll make a great UN representative. It's amazing it took this long for the Senate to confirm him. And of course, it involves the procedural decisions to go nuclear in some cases of Trump nominees. But I'm glad he's going to be there. And Hugh, I just add that the UN, I'm a sharp critic of the UN. I don't like the UN at all. But often the UN responds to what America puts in it. If we have a strong advocate for America in that role, you can actually, I think, make some waves and get the institution to pay attention. And I expect that's what Mike Waltz will be doing.
I think Jean Kirkpatrick and Daniel Patrick Moynihan are very high bars to meet, but especially as they vote on a Palestinian state. I thought the exchange at the press conference yesterday, where some lefty from the BBC asked President Trump when he'll end the killing in Gaza, illustrates the problem that our ambassador has to overcome. And you've got to be nimble and you got to be quick.
Yes, I mean, the UN's been a den of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism for decades, and we need an American representative to the UN who can stand for Israel and condemn the UN when it goes down it continues to go down this anti-Semitic path. And this kind of ridiculous recognition of a Palestinian state that doesn't exist and will never exist is just another instance of the UN's ignominy.
Do you think it rewards Hamas? We got 30 seconds.
It absolutely rewards Hamas. Remember, the ceasefire negotiations ended when the European governments started pledging to recognize a Palestinian state, rewarding Hamas for the terrorism, for the murder, and for the holding of these captives now almost for 2 years.
Well said. Matt, on Monday night of this week, Jimmy Kimmel said ridiculous things that were a lie. And Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, said we can do this the easy way or the hard way, indicating he was going to call for an investigation into the public interest. He didn't do anything, though, and he's well within his rights to say that. Indeed, he has a framework, statutory, that surrounds him, that obliges him to do that when he thinks it's been crossed. But all of a sudden, we have the beat-up Brendan Carr movement by people who judge themselves constitutional experts who've never actually we're right now on an FCC-regulated platform. If you use one of the 7 dirty words, I'm going to pay $1,000 for every outlet over which that is heard, because there are children in the car and the FCC framework exists for a reason. So we may or may not agree on this. I think Brendan Carr was within his rights. What do you think?
I think we could have expected what Brendan Carr said, because he's made no bones about the fact that he believes in the public interest language in the FCC authorizing statute, and he believes that it's a conservative's role to enforce that, just as much as liberals have been using the FCC to shape the broadcast spectrum and the broadcast networks for decades. Now, would I have put it the way that Brendan Carr put it? No. Would I maybe have stayed out of it so that what was really happening, which was audience outrage, justified outrage at Jimmy Kimmel's lie, and the affiliates' deep concern that Jimmy Kimmel would go back on the air and refuse to apologize and attack MAGA even more? Would I rather have that be the real story? Yes. But nonetheless, what's done is done, and Jimmy Kimmel has been suspended indefinitely for making a falsehood, a defamation, and I think that's not endangering anyone's First Amendment rights.
Well, I was shocked today because your colleague, you weren't on the Friday podcast, Christine Rosen, for whom I have immense respect, nevertheless let fly with, you're not a real conservative if you don't condemn Brendan Carr. That's a paraphrase. And I thought to myself, I'm a rule of law conservative. The FCC regulated broadcast stations are licensees of the public spectrum. They're different than cable, podcast, and the street corner. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. Do you think people don't understand the FCC's role with broadcast outlets?
They certainly don't understand it, Hugh. And I think that because we're in such a tough moment and a very politicized moment. We're rushing to make a lot of hysterical judgments about what's happening here. I don't believe the people who have faced firing or other sanction for either celebrating Kirk's death or rationalize it are the victims of a cancel culture. That's not what cancel culture is. Cancel culture is turning up politically incorrect or contrarian opinions in order to hound people out of public life. Having people pay a price for glorifying murder is not cancel culture. And in the case of Jimmy Kimmel, we just have to recognize the fact that his reaction to the murder of Charlie Kirk was to perpetuate the falsehood that the assassin was a member of the MAGA movement. We know that not to be the case. And that alone was reason
And to be indifferent. His sin wasn't the political sin. His sin was indifference to grief. I mean, there's a lot of real grief among a lot of people. N.T. Wright referenced a poem by a British poet, Francis Thompson, sort of a Catholic mystic, who wrote, "But when so sad and canst not sadder cry, and upon sigh sore so a loss, shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder pitched between heaven and Charing Cross." He was capturing the fact that sometimes you just can't cheer people up. You can't look past the wound. People who don't want to indulge grief for even a week, aren't they kind of indecent?
Well, there's certainly an indecency there, but I also have been just kind of puzzled by the fact that Kimmel's suspension is generating much more outrage among elite institutions
Well,
than Kirk's assassination in public. And I think, once again, we have half the country that just cannot recognize Charlie Kirk and the important part he played in the lives of millions of Americans. And I think there's a real sense of loss, not just among the conservatives for losing Kirk, but I think among these liberals are sense that they no longer control the culture in the way that they once did. And that's contributing kind of to just the over-the-top language, kind of calling Trump and the right the very names that have contributed to this kind of burgeoning acceptance of political violence on the left.
Now, I think decency remains on the center left. I really do. A lot of people haven't piled on here, but it's gone. And I think the Democrats are in danger of going the way of the Whigs. And by that, I mean becoming irrelevant to the country. The fact that we can't read, our kids can't read, the fact that culture is coarse. Do you think they're in danger of going over the cliff? Because we're sort of assuming a 45-45-10 split, and I'm beginning to wonder if Trump hasn't broken that.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know what the next election will bring, Hugh, but I do know that the Democrats are becoming the Democratic Socialist Party. It's not the Democratic Party. It's now becoming the Democratic Socialist Party. And that is a very different Democratic Party than I think any of us are used to. And it's one that is much more radical than the Democratic Party has ever been. And to listen to the Zoran Mamdanis or AOC, or listen to the just disgusting way that Ilhan Omar has behaved since Charlie Kirk's assassination, you begin to see a glimpse of what that Democratic Socialist Party looks like. And I think it will frighten and repel most Americans.
And the one guy who's not going to let it slide is Donald Trump. Second guy who's not going to let it slide is J.D. Vance. They're rhetorically gifted at pointing out what you just underscored, that it's not your father's Democratic Party. Matt Continetti, always a pleasure to talk to you. Follow him on X at Continetti. Listen to him on the Commentary Podcast and on the Big Weekend Pod. Thank you. I always tell you, the rules of the Federal Communications Committee require me to identify my sponsors. One of those sponsors is the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. But I have to approve every sponsor that appears on my program, and I very much approve of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And what they are doing right now is helping Americans who support Israel prepare to support Israel on October 5 through October 7th by raising money to plant the Israeli flag across the United States in memorial of the 1,200 innocent Israelis, the 5,000 wounded, the 250 hostages taken 2 years ago this October 7th. Flags of Fellowship is organized by the International Fellowships of Christians and Jews, and on October 5, just a few weeks away, millions of Americans will prayerfully plant an Israeli flag in honor and solidarity with the victims of that day, some of whom remain in the tunnels of Hamas. That's Love in Action, and now you can be a part of that movement as well. To get more information about how you can join in the Flags of Fellowship moment, please visit ifcj.org, ifcj.org, ifcj.org. Your support is very, very much appreciated. Also want to play for you just the absurdity out there. This is Tim Waltz today on MSNBC with Chris Hayes, cut number 8. Maybe it's not able, it might not be able to switch over as quickly from the video.
Hi, Chris,
we're playing
good to
for
see
the
you.
IFCJ.
This is it. If you ever wondered how democracy dies, you're witnessing it. And I know it's people are watching a football game tonight, and we're kind of sleepwalk through this thing. But
don't remind
this
them.
Is,
we got him here.
One of the most
Governor.
outrageous affronts. Yeah, well, right. It's one of the most outrageous affronts on this. This is North Korea style stuff, and it's being done because this is a weak, thin-skinned man who's failing as a president. All of the things he promised.
Waltz is not very smart, and he was rejected by the American people, and he'll never have a role in public life much longer than the one that he's currently in. And that North Korea type, I'll bet he doesn't know even the capital of North Korea. I am in the Relief Factor studio, another sponsor. Time for me to take my Relief Factor because tomorrow morning I get to take a long one, finally, because the travel is over until Monday, and I got another big travel week ahead. Alex Marlowe will be in for me on Monday. Thank you, Alex, for doing that. 4 pills, and every day if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I take it so you can watch me and know that I genuinely believe in the products that sponsor my show. It's the only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years. I've taken it for 12 years. I credit it with getting rid of the minor aches and pains that inevitably come with exercise and aging, especially if I do what I want to do tomorrow, which is 10. I haven't done a 10 in a while, but I think I can. And I'd like to do it and get back into that, in that groove. Summer is not the time to overdo it because the temperatures are higher, but fall and spring is the time to get your distances in, your miles higher, and Relief Factor makes that possible. But if you're not a runner, a trundler, or a walker, or you don't go to the gym, you don't swim, at least use Relief Factor. 1-800-4 in the word relief, or head to their website, get the starter pack for $19.95 at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Ben Domenech is my guest. He's editor-at-large at The Spectator. He is the host of the Big Ben podcast. You can follow him on X at Ben Domenech, who's a Fox News contributor. Ben, I want to begin by asking you generally, we talked about Charlie last week, what has changed, if anything, in the week since?
Well, I think what's changed in the week since, Hugh, is that this story has become something that I think has actually woken the left up to the fact that it's not going to go away quickly. I think that there was an illusion in the initial period among those who were unfamiliar with Charlie or the depth of his appeal to the American people well beyond the conservative sphere, that I think allowed many on the left and in the media to treat this as if this was going to be a 48, 72-hour story. And then I think they were shocked at everything that happened over the weekend after we talked last week in terms of the outpouring of affection for Charlie at NFL stadiums, college stadiums, sporting events across the country, public events, people dedicating things to him, pitchers wearing his name on their hats, NASCAR drivers dedicating their win to him. It's one of these situations where I think the left was rudely awakened by how his appeal stretched far beyond what they knew. When Coldplay is stopping their concert to encourage people to pray for your family, it means that you had a cultural resonance that is far beyond that of just a political activist, which is what I think they thought Charlie was. And a big part of that, I truly believe, was driven by the fact that he was talking about more than politics. He was talking about faith. And that's something that in this particular moment for this generation of unchurched Americans, had a significant resonance in terms of their lives and in terms of what they saw in him. You've seen that continue, and I think you're only going to see it continue. And I also think that it has developed into a story nationally that is an argument about speech, the appropriateness of speech, and you see a lot of lefties who didn't have any problem with the government action or the populist action against certain figures in the past, now suddenly developing a problem with it. And I think that that's going to be something that continues as well as a story that stretches beyond this moment and into the future.
Let me stay with point one, and we'll get to point two. Point one, I want to play for you a minute 21 clip of Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Cardinal of New York,
Yes, this is great.
This morning, cut 4.
So when I heard the tragic news, I said, oh, I wonder who he was. And then all of a sudden, this overwhelming sense of sorrow and kind of renewal. And I thought, I got to learn about this guy. And the more I learned about him, I thought, this guy's a modern-day St. Paul. He was a missionary. He's an evangelist. He's a hero. He's one, I think, that knew what Jesus meant when he said, the truth will set you free. And to do it, now, I understand he was pretty blunt. And he was pretty direct. He didn't try to avoid any controversy. He didn't even try to avoid confrontation. The difference is the way, the mode, the style that he did it, always with respect. And not only was that a gracious, kind of virtuous thing to do, it's effective. Because when your opponents see, this guy kind of respects me. We kind of disagree here, but he kind of enjoys me. And he's thanking me for being here. And he's telling me he appreciates the trust I have in him in sharing my views. I thought, this guy can teach us something. I've been spending the last week reading about him. And so last night, I was at NYU Catholic Student Center, about 200 students there. This is what they talked about.
Wow.
This is
What do you think, Ben?
Well, I think that's, first off, it's very moving, but it's also, I think, indicative of, the fact that there are so few people who truly can be spoken of in this day and age as evangelists, as people who go into the other side and that will interact with them. And part of that, quite frankly, Hugh, I blame on the mass media. I blame on the fact that we no longer have places where these conversations happen, and that they are conversations, that they are debates, they are even arguments when they get heated. But, the number of places that this even happens is so few and far between. You can really list them very shortly. I would say that Bill Maher is basically the last holdout of a place where you're likely to see two people doing it. Otherwise, you're basically seeing folks going hammer and tongs with, one person who's surrounded and the like. And look, this is something that I think we have lost in America as a culture, and that is significant, because it is something that I think is central to the way that we adjudicate and converse about the deepest disagreements that we have in ways that are healthy and in ways that move things forward. And look, it's the people who, ultimately the folks who rejected Charlie and viewed him as being just a fascist Nazi, what have you, pick your insult. They were the one who were caricaturing him, and so many people who did not agree with him also respected what he was willing to do, because it is such a rarity in this day and age.
Now, I was listening by complete accident and coincidence to N.T. Wright's commentary on the Acts last night. And he's one of the greatest theologians in the world. And
you're going OG there. That's great.
Yeah, this is OG. And he was talking about the martyrdom of Stephen, which is early in Acts. And Stephen's last prayer was to pray for his enemies and the people who were killing him. I am curious about the memorial service, because Matt Continetti has warned, don't let it become Wellstone 2.0. Do you think they can prevent that?
It's so funny, because my wife told me that he had warned that, and it was literally the very first thing that I said to her when we were driving in the car together and they were announcing it was, do you remember Paul Wellstone? I mean, I really hope that doesn't happen. But please continue.
Well, one of the things N.T. Wright quoted was a poem that I was unfamiliar with by Francis Thompson, a Catholic mystical poet who wrote, I think in the early 1900s, "But when so sad thou canst not sadder cry, and upon thy so sore loss shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder, pitched betwixt heaven and Charing Cross." because he lived in London. So you're saying that normally when you're in deep grief, sometimes you'll get a glimpse of angels, and that's a trend in theological history. Do you think it'll be somber and theological, or do you think it'll be political and loud?
I really hope it's the former and not the latter. It's very, look, here's one thing I will say. This is a moment that brings out the spiritual side of people, I think, and I think we've seen that actually publicly from a lot of the folks who are planning to speak. But then at the same time, there are many people, I think, who, they work in politics, but politics is also their life. And it's a defining aspect. And, I've always been someone who tries to purposefully avoid that taking over every aspect of what I do, because I understand that it's less important in the grand scheme of things. But I hope that in this moment that they will be called to more represent the spiritual, the somber, the side of this that is designed to direct people toward the cross and toward faith and toward the kind of values that I believe set him apart as more than just a political activist, and not just twinge into the realm of complaining about the other side, even as they have shown us how villainous they can be in reaction to his death.
Now, in that stadium, whether it's 40, 50, 60,000 people, there will be some counter-protesters. They will have signs. They'll do the Code Pink thing. And at a political rally, you shout USA, USA, USA. I hope they shout God bless Charlie, God bless Charlie, God bless Charlie. But I don't want the networks to show it. Do you think they'll be able to resist?
I don't. I'm sorry, Hugh. I just don't. I think that the way that this has been treated has been a very disappointing, but as I've said to you, eye-opening, I think, for a lot of Americans about how much more, and I mean, I said this on Special Report, and I can't remember, I guess it was this week, that the truth is this exposed, I think, that the radical left is a much more sizable portion of the left than any of us have wrestled with, and that the ramifications of that, I think, are very serious. You see it even in the vote today, which should have been a unanimous vote. Even if you had objections to Charlie, this should have been the easiest thing in the world for the House of Representatives to do. And yet you have almost 60 Democrats who don't just vote present, they vote no. And then there are a host of them who vote present as well. I mean, I'm sorry. I can't think of a figure who I wouldn't be willing to say this kind of stuff about, that is so benign, that is so, even
an assassination victim.
I mean, this is an assassination victim. Exactly. And it's just the sort of thing where, look, Hugh, I just think this should be easy. And the fact that it's hard for so many people, the fact that their natural posture is one of partisanship over the kind of solace that should be offered to any family, to any community in this time of grief. It just is very disappointing to me, but it's also revealing of their character, and I think that we should take them at their word in this moment.
Mike Waltz is my friend. I read Warrior Diplomat. My son worked for him for a while. He doesn't work for him anymore, not going to New York with him. But I thought we needed a UN ambassador up there to be there for UNGA when the vote is taken on recognizing a Palestinian state. It was 47 to 43. What are the 43 thinking about?
I don't get this. And again, this is one of those situations where, I'm of the belief that you vote against the president's nominees when they are deeply unqualified individuals, when they've proven that they, cannot do the job. Otherwise, I think you should vote to approve the president's nominees because they are his choice and he was elected and this is part of the job. You have to have serious, I think, concerns about someone's capabilities, but also someone's, the mindset. Are they appropriate for the job? In order to oppose them, certainly, I just don't think you can have any of those concerns about him. And it's one of these situations where this ought to have been done much earlier. It should have been pushed through a lot earlier, but at least it got done in time for him to give the right argument against so many who are going to come together to do a very stupid thing, which, frankly, the United Nations is known for as an entity.
Can you explain, I've already done it, but let's hear Ben Domenech explain why it is so stupid to recognize a Palestinian state.
Well, personally, I think it's stupid because Palestine isn't a place. But I'm sorry. But one of the things that I think is particularly stupid about it is that in this moment, it is an act. I will focus on this moment. It is an act of rewarding the worst actors in this situation. It is an act of giving the terrorists what they want. It is an act that is designed to not just say, this worked, but to give them the lesson, this will work in the future. You can bend us, this international community, to your will if you are willing to stoop to doing deeply evil things and continue to do those evil things without any kind of approach that is designed to mitigate anything, without any kind of nods towards actual peaceful activity. No, this is not what has happened here. Instead, it's giving the terrorists what they want effectively, and it's something that should have been rejected just outright as anything that could happen prior to all the hostages being released. And, the only critique that I would have of the president's visit, to the UK is that I think he should have filleted Starmer. Even, he obviously laid out the fact that he disagreed with him on this point. But I think that it was something where he could have gone after him heavier and made a more direct point on it. And I hope that he will, of these foreign leaders who are just so cowardly in this moment.
I'm hoping Waltz follows up after the president makes his speech. Ben, I have been explaining all day online, and I'm done, that free speech and the First Amendment are not the same thing. You and I are talking right now on an FCC-regulated platform, both radio and television, the Salem News Channel and the Salem Media Network and all my affiliates. If we use the 7 deadly words, we'll be fined $1,000 per utterance per station over which it airs that is regulated by the FCC. We are licensees. We have to be decent and in the public interest. It's complicated, but it's law, and Brendan Carr has First Amendment rights too. Jimmy Kimmel said a really stupid thing. Within 4 hours, Nexstar and Sinclair had told ABC, we're pulling him, and ABC pulled him. And I'm not sure Brendan Carr had anything to do with it because the period of time was too quick. Some people think that's evidence, but it's actually not evidence, contrary evidence. But now, I think it's fair. If you don't like what Carr said, I do like what Carr said. I think we want to raise the standard of public discourse. But if you like what he said, you're free to defend him, and he is free to say it. What do you think?
So I'll take a step back and say that I will not say it's the devil's advocate position. It's the Ted Cruz advocate position that he did not like what Brendan Carr said. He called it sounding like a mob boss and that kind of thing, and was concerned about it. And I certainly think his conservative credentials speak for themselves. And I think that those views, I do believe, speak for a portion of the American right, but I think it's a much smaller portion than people truly understand, because they have no problem, I think the vast majority of them, with the kind of thing that just happened here. And the truth is, it is the market speaking. People would like to establish a narrative, as they have established it before, that this is an administration that is cracking down on its opponents, cracking down on its enemies, et cetera, in the public square, and that it's eliminating free speech in some perspective. Where were they when the hammer of government was coming down, or threatened to come down, on the whole of Silicon Valley during the portion when the Joe Biden administration was making, you don't want that to get broke, kind of symbolic statements to them, forcing them to engage in censorship fueled by NGOs and a whole network of organizations. What I would say is, I am of the opinion, and I know I saw that your disagreement with my proposed compromise, which I hope you understand.
I do.
Pretty solidly written with tongue in cheek, because it will not happen. Namely, that I think the funniest thing in the world to do would be for Brendan Carr to spend the next 3 years going hammer and tongs against all the people for any violations that he sees, and then eliminate the FCC at the end of it, so that the left can't immediately turn around and do the same thing. But I do believe people are rule followers when it's convenient for them, but they do not like it when conservatives enforce the rules. And that is what I believe has happened in this situation. Everything Brendan Carr said, from my perspective, he is allowed to say, and I do not think that he did anything that went beyond the rules that are in place here. And the affiliates have a profit motive. They want to put things on TV that people like. Hosting decisions on programs are made by these networks based on who the affiliates like. Okay, it is simply a fact of the business. And if the affiliates don't like you and the viewers don't like you, then that's when shows get canceled. And Jimmy Kimmel was running along, skirting the edge, the lowest rated of all of these low-rated late-night shows, and he rendered himself so political that he was not someone who could even be the face of the network anymore. He couldn't be someone like Jimmy Fallon out there representing the network. So I think he was living on borrowed time anyway. But look, this whole narrative that the left is advancing now, that this is about some kind of big, noble free speech fight, more power to you, man, because this guy is not the guy you want to get in bed with on that fight, and this was not something that people are going to care about because he was not popular. And I do not believe in any way that this is an abrogation of any responsibility for free speech. It's just absolutely laughable.
Now, I do have a colleague at Chapman University Law School who routinely stops me in the faculty lounge and says, Trump is acting as an authoritarian because he's telling businesses what to do and they're afraid to stand up to him. To which my response is, and Obama? Because it just seems to me that Eric Schmidt in his new book, Senator Schmidt, laid out the Biden year laying on to Silicon Valley. That 86 people in the government demanded changes to moderation rules at the big tech companies, 20 of them from the White House. They don't have the statutory authority that Brandon Carr has. They're free agents.
Yes. And this is something that we've seen repeatedly over the years. You and I know how often they have gone after so many different conservative voices using every tool at their disposal when it came to going after carriers, going after affiliates, going after all of these different entities. I mean, this is a situation that has been playing out for years, and the left had no compunction about trying to use these rules to get people canceled. It's just that people didn't run afoul of them, so they were able to survive those types of challenges. They didn't break the rules in the way that would have allowed this kind of thing. Jimmy Kimmel.
Did you ever hear the local content rule proposal, Ben?
The local content rule proposal? No, I'm not sure.
The FCC under Obama wanted to pass a rule that required every radio station to have local content, which was an attempt to kill syndicated product. That was an attack on me. That was an attack on Rush. That was an attack on Mark Levin, an attack on Gallagher, an attack on Elder. And it was dressed up in, we just want to serve the local community. Nonsense. It was an attack on conservative talk radio. And no one said a word.
And the other thing is, I mean, again, Carr has said, we might take a look at The View as well. The View is technically an ABC News program, so it does not have the kind of equal time, requirements that are of these shows, as are shows like Jimmy Kimmel's. And one of the things that comes with that, of course, is that's the reason they have to trot out somebody to read off a bullet-pointed list whenever they say a bunch of false things, because they're worried about running afoul of that. But keep in mind, this is a broadcast that has had on no conservatives, none, in the last year, effectively. And that's the kind of thing that I think we have to look at and say, is this
how are
really
its
what
ratings?
The broadcast airways are for? Huh?
Since your wife left, haven't its ratings gone like to hell?
They certainly, yes. I would say generally yes. The one thing I will say, Hugh, is if you want to talk about a place that has issues with this, keep in mind, ABC is owned by Disney, and Disney, unlike all these other places, it runs on theme parks. It runs on mass media. It runs on appealing to everybody in the audience. And so I think that Bob Iger, which is, the reports are it was as high a decision as Iger. This is that level of a decision in terms of we are tired of pissing off Republicans and independents and conservatives who see this as a political broadcast and not as something that they come home for, put up their feet and listen to a bit of comedy.
I got to ask you, I think it will be Bud Light 2.0 if they bring him back. But that time slot is dead. My parents used to fall asleep watching Johnny Carson. That's what he did. That's why he had 30 million people. I just think it's a dead time slot.
I think it's a dead time slot. But I will just say this. You know what the funniest thing they could do is?
Shane Gillis.
Adam Carolla has a great podcast.
I was going to go to Shane Gillis, but I don't know if he could actually make the FCC rules.
No. He'd have to have too much Bud Light when he was on stage.
That's a very funny bit. Always good to talk to you, Ben Domenech, and good to disagree with you civilly online. Follow him on X at @BDomenech. Get his Transom Substack, and of course read The Spectator, where he contributes quite a lot. Brent Shear, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, published a massive story from their reporter, their White House correspondent, Mary Margaret Olahan. And I'll just read it. Lawyers for Nicholas Roski, the man who tried to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, told the court today that he now goes by Sophie Roski and uses female pronouns. That's the news. Now I need to do my sponsorships because I'm an FCC regulated platform. My first sponsorship is WebRoot. And boy, do I believe in WebRoot. Many of you love the Victor Davis Hanson interview from last week, and you were stunned to find that Victor had been the victim of identity theft and bank fraud. That's not going to happen to you, I hope, if you have WebRoot Total Protection. You can get WebRoot Total Protection, gives you insurance for your digital life on many, many dimensions, and for your peace of mind when you go to webroot.com/Hewitt. Right now you get 50% off. WebRoot Total Protection, 50% off, webroot.com/Hewitt. And you know what you get? Identity protection for up to 10 members of your family, up to $1 million in fraud expense reimbursement, 24/7 U.S.-based customer support, including, I think this is very, very important because elders, senior citizens are the number one victim of identity theft, a dedicated elder fraud hotline. What's an old person to do when they think something's wrong? You call the fraud line over at WebRoot. You get 24/7 U.S.-based customer support, so the old person who calls actually gets someone who's an American talking to you in America. And they do a lot of preventative maintenance on the deep web. You get antivirus protection, a secure VPN cloud backup. All your devices, your privacy, your personal information are protected from every angle. Even if they don't drain your bank accounts, the crooks are out there, are ready to steal what they can. Give yourself protection, webroot.com/Hewitt. Let me also tell you about Consumer Cellular. And again, this is kind of aimed at my older demo. My demo, the money demo is 18 to 49. I'm very glad I have a lot of young kids listening. Thank you. But the FCC recognizes they're in the car and the parent doesn't want to hear one of the 7 deadly words and have to turn off the radio too late. So I never use those. But I'm also obliged to tell you Consumer Cellular is a sponsor. But I want you to know that Consumer Cellular is in my home and I use it. And Consumer Cellular can be reached at 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Now, why do you want to take the 20 to 30 to 45 minutes to switch your cell phone provider? Very simple. Save money. Many of you have unlimited data plans. Maybe you think you need one. You're over 50, you probably don't. Probably need 10 gigs, maybe 5 gigs, save a lot of money. But if you want an unlimited data plan and you're over 50 years old, $60 a month for 2 lines. You keep your number, you keep your device. If you want to, you can change devices. You keep all your data, all your contacts, you lose nothing. Nothing changes. You get the same service. You don't have to sacrifice service for savings. Remember to use my code, HUGH25. That gives you an additional $5 a month for each of the next 5 months when you sign up and switch to Consumer Cellular. But remember, it all depends on your data usage. So get your phone bill out before you call, because maybe you're like me and you actually do use a lot of data and you want those 2 lines for $60 a month. But if you're not like me and you're not living on the web because you have to, because it's your job, Consumer Cellular, give them a call, 1-800-411-4454, or visit consumercellular.com/Hugh. Finally, my sponsor, Relief Factor. Now, you're used to that, and you know they've been my sponsor for 12 years, and you know I've been taking it for 12 years, and you know that I've taken no other supplements, not one, nothing else, just Relief Factor for 12 years and nothing for 20 years. More than 20 years. More like 24 years. I took a supplement the first year I was on the radio, and I didn't like it. We stopped. And since then, I've been very supplement adverse. I had to sit down with the founder of this. I had to read the science. I believe the science. I believe that everybody has a natural anti-inflammatory system that helps you contain minor aches and pains. Your back shouldn't hurt. Your knees shouldn't creak and hurt. Well, they might have to creak, but they shouldn't hurt. Your calf shouldn't hurt. It doesn't do anything for plantar fasciitis. There's things that can't be fixed with inflammatory systems that are healthy. But you do want to keep your anti-inflammatory system healthy and supportive, and that's what Relief Factor does, because the 4 supplements I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, they work together. 3-week starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4RELIEF or visit relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt has been away for a couple of days. She's back tomorrow. One of the things I get to indulge in when I'm a bachelor is I turn on a book on tape and I fall asleep. And usually I wake up in the middle of the night and turn it off, but I didn't. So this morning I woke about 5 o'clock in the morning, and N.T. Wright, noted theologian, if you don't know who Tom Wright is, Bishop Tom Wright, is, along with Ratzinger, I think the two greatest theologians of the last century. And Tom Wright was talking about the martyrdom of Stephen in Acts. And as I listened to it, I thought, I got to share this. So I posted this morning, and forgive me for reading from myself. There will be tens of thousands of friends of Charlie Kirk gathering in Phoenix this weekend, many in shock still, and many in deep, deep mourning and grief. Bishop N.T. Wright is in the first rank of modern Christian theologians, along with Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Benedict, and perhaps a handful of others. In Bishop's Wright book on the Acts of the Apostles, Wright focuses an extended section on the stoning of Stephen. This great English theologian quotes Francis Thompson, who was, quote, a strange and powerful English poet of the earliest 20th century. He was, writes Wright, a believing Christian, but his life had been sad and difficult in a number of ways. And the poem he quoted, he continued on, yet in the middle of his suffering he discovered a strange truth, which he put into memorable verse. At the very moment when all seems most worst and bleak, just then the presence of Jesus Christ and of his angels can be so real and powerful that it is though some scenes from the Gospels are coming true before your very eyes. Since Thompson lived in London, Wright continued, that is where he placed his remarkable vision. And then Tom Wright quotes Francis Thompson, quote, but when so sad thou canst not sadder cry, and upon thy so sore loss shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder, pitched betwixt heaven and Charing Cross. Yea, in the night, my soul, my daughter, cry, clinging to heaven by the hems, and lo, Christ walking on the water, not of Gennesaret, but of the Thames. This goes in my mind, Wright continues, with the reflection that sometimes in the Bible, when angels appear, it is precisely to people who are beside themselves with grief, like Mary at the tomb of Jesus in John chapter 20. This isn't a reason, of course, for seeking out misery, but it might help a bit in understanding this dramatic passage of the story of Stephen, the first Christian martyr. There have been many martyrs during the last few centuries of Jewish history, before the time of Jesus. About 200 years before the Jesus' day, a pagan king from Syria took over Jerusalem, desecrated the temple, forced many Jews to renounce their laws, their ancestral way of life, and even to eat pork, which was, of course, forbidden in the law. The aim was obvious, Wright continues, get the Jews to renounce their national charter, and they will be easier to govern, less likely to rebel. But many Jews resisted in their vivid accounts of how they met their deaths. We are told in particular of what they said. One after the other, the most striking account is in 2 Maccabees chapter 7, they not only bear witness to their own faith, particularly in the resurrection they believe they will enjoy on the last day, they also threaten their torturer with dire punishments to come. Quote, do not think, says one, that God has forsaken our people. Keep on and see how his mighty power will torture you and your descendants. Wright continues, this is utterly typical of many Jewish stories of people being tortured and killed for their belief and way of life. Now, Hugh Hewitt. Grief should not express itself in anger or threats this weekend. Many millions will watch all or part of the memorial service for Charlie. It is the last great turning point conference he will have convened. People who knew Charlie far, far more closely than I did are free to disagree, but I believe his wish would have been that this gathering be completely peaceful, though somber and grief-filled, alive with Christian witness and celebration of life, free of the disease anger that consumed his assassin, honoring of Charlie's wife, children, family, and his work, hope-filled, resilient, and optimistic, as Charlie seemed always to be. I recommend N.T. Wright on anything. There's another book, and maybe someone will help me. There's a very famous Christian author who mostly writes fiction, but he wrote a small book on the axe. I can't remember his name, and I can't, therefore, find the book to get the Audible book. I think the axe is one of the great books of the Christian Testament. It's fabulous. And N.T. Wright's explication of it is fabulous. I'm going to have to call up Mark Roberts or Archbishop Chaput and find out who's the great Christian guy who wrote about Acts. Maybe, I don't know if Ratzinger did. If Pope Benedict did, I'll read that too. But I find, now, Fetching Mrs. Hewitt Hates Noise, if I want to listen to something to turn off the brain, which is what I do when the brain is racing, go to something completely different. Don't read politics. Listen to Will Durant. I've been listening to the memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, which are grand, but they're getting long. And so I switched up to N.T. Wright last night, and it was perfect. And sometimes you get blessed when you wake up in the morning if you forgot to turn it off. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt hates that. She hates noise. So I put an earphone in and listen that way. And that works because it usually takes about 30 minutes. It's why white noise machines, by the way, are useful with infants, is that no interruption. And white noise with content is best for seniors. And I wish I'd discovered it at 40, because I'm always difficult to slow the mind down. And if you're one of those people, my suggestion, N.T. Wright, The Acts of the Apostles, not because it's boring, because it is so different from whatever else you were thinking about. Ditto Will Durant and The Age of Napoleon, about the Age of Napoleon, which I had also listened to last night first, and I decided I'm too interested in this. I got to turn this off. He talked about people who are obliged to live in periods of concentrated history, like the French between 1789 and 1815. They get a century's worth of history in 25 or 30 years. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to be Chinese under Mao. You don't want to be a Russian under Lenin and Stalin. Americans generally, because the Constitution endures, have been spared that. So that's my recommendation for your weekend. N.T. Wright, The Acts of the Apostles, audiobook. Time for the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. This was a week of soul searching for those of us on the right, and we hope for those on the left, and that's what I've been considering this week. Leading in the movement of the trends that I've been tracking is the growing population in which empathy is lacking. We've defined the human species with a trait so beneficial as the only living creature whose instincts are sacrificial. But we're all in competition. We call our rivals brother, and the greatest love of all is to give life for another. But lately we've seen evidence, which some have called foreboding, that this contact with divinity is suddenly eroding. To affect so many people and remain, in fact, evasive, whatever was the cause must have been no doubt pervasive. I've considered all the evidence I have at my disposal, and despite my lack of training, this is my proposal. I'm sorry to be daring, but here's what I suspect. The vaccines we were given had a nasty side effect, but lest you call me crazy and my theorem satanic, it's not the substance of the vaccinations, rather, it's the panic. In a famine, it's the freezer. In the desert, it's the thirst. And in a sinking vessel, gotta grab those lifeboats first. Late-night entertainers, I hesitate to bait them, said other folks are killing you, so it's okay to hate them. We introduced a toxin to the body politic. Could epidemic selfishness be making people sick? That's Greater Love Hath No Man by Tarzana Joe.
That's pretty profound, Joe. There's a lot of grifting going on. A whole bunch of grifting going on.
The lockdowns and a pandemic, they had economic effects, they had educational effects. We look at those, we measure those. But what about the spiritual effects? And
well, one of the best commentators out there, and I'm trying to remember who it was, commented that the assassin was a COVID kid. His high school and college deeply disrupted by the shutdown of 2020, 2021. And that led a whole cohort of internet savvy people to sit at home and stay on the internet. Consequences follow. I don't know what they are. That's why I proposed a Kirk Commission so that we get a grip on it. But there are cellars and recesses in the internet into which fanatics, every bit as twisted as Hamas, but not yet with guns, live. And I don't know what it did to people. Do you?
Yeah, but I think we're seeing evidence of it, and we do have to take a long look at ourselves as a society. We think, okay, well, it's not like it's not like a cancer that we can excise. It's like, do you ever have mold in your house and they come back and they have to hit it with bleach and they have to hit it again and hit it again? It's hard to get rid of. It's every little
But
space.
Joe is not hard to get rid of. He's ubiquitous. Write to him for a poem at tarzanajoe@reagan.com. tarzanajoe@reagan.com for all your poetry needs. Rates are reasonable. And his poem today will be posted at tarzanajoe.com, and there's also a button there, need a poem, tarzanajoe.com.